make the area safe, and that we're taking preemptive actions. This is not a reactive one. Additionally, the reservoir that we are working on is a much smaller dam than what you may be accustomed to, the one that everybody goes fishing for catfish, which is reservoir number 4, I believe.
Yes.
The Board of Water Supply's Nuuanu Dam number 1 is about 1.5 feet below a spillway due to the amount of rain brought about by former tropical storm Olivia. The water rose 4 feet overnight. I think this was last night, Wednesday, and I think we had about 7.3 inches of rain in that area. BWS constantly monitors that reservoir and all reservoirs that they're controlling, and also have been siphoning off excess water. They siphon to keep the levels low. The siphoning wasn't working as fast as we would have liked, and so we brought in extra pumps. Board of Water Supply has 2 pumps working, and now we supplemented that with pumpers from the fire department. With that, I'll turn it over to Ernie.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ernie Lau, Manager and Chief Engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. I just want to thank the Managing Director for the support of the city's resources. Yes, there are 2 BWS pumps right now in operation there on the dam itself. And also Honolulu Fire Department has mobilized 2 fire engines to help with pumping water out of the reservoir. The idea this morning, first of all, I think I want to clarify a misconception that might be out there. This is, like the Managing Director said, this is not the large reservoir that you see as you go Mauka on Pali Highway. If you look on the right, you'll see Nuuanu Reservoir number 4. And that's where we used to, many years ago, have catfish fishing. If some of you have been there, that's a really large reservoir. And we've kept that one at a very low level for many years. The other reservoir that we're talking about today is Nuuanu Reservoir number 1. As you go up Pali Highway going Mauka, heading toward Kailua, it's actually on the left side behind the Board of Water Supply water tank. And for some of the old folks out there that you remember the poinsettias along Pali Highway during the Christmas time, this little reservoir, the smaller reservoir, is located behind there. It holds about 100 acre-feet of water, and it was built in 1905. So we saw that because of Tropical Storm Olivia dumping a lot of rain in that area last night, that the water level rose about 4 to 5 feet just over the evening. And because of that, I felt this morning it would be more proactive, and basically out of the abundance of caution to try to lower the water level even more quickly than using just our siphons that we normally have in operation. So that's why we decided this morning to pump. The water has not even reached the spillway, and the spillway is a normal part of a reservoir like this. It allows the safe release of water from the reservoir when the levels behind the dam reaches a certain point. You don't want to have a dam like this, which is an earthen dam, where the water levels go above the top of the dam itself and start to go over the dam. This is not a dam breach situation right now. We're nowhere close to that. We're just trying to keep the water levels lower than the spillway, and because once water goes over the spillway, then you'll start to experience more flooding downstream, because the water has to go someplace, and it'll go Makai downstream. So that's the situation right now. We're making a little bit of headway, just a little bit, 2 to 3 inches lower, and more recently, declining water levels, and if the rains decrease, and we'll make more headway. We'll continue to pump and try to lower the water level even more so over the next week or so. Are there any questions?
Ernie, at what point would you have had to call for an evacuation of Nuuanu residents with the water?
So based on our plans, working with the State Department of Land and Natural Resources, when the water level gets to about within 1 foot lower than the top of the dam itself, that's when it triggers mandatory evacuations. And we'll be sharing today with you a map of the general evacuation areas for the community. We're not anywhere close to that. I want to stress that. But we want people to know that when you live below a dam, if the dam were to fail, these areas would be the areas we'd want to evacuate before the failure of the dam. But we're nowhere close to that.
Were there any precautions taken before to avoid a situation like this, knowing that potential heavy rains were headed in with Olivia?
That's where we try to keep the water levels low, and the use of the siphon to try to remove water from the reservoir. This reservoir is very old, 1905, and part of the problem challenge of this reservoir, which is different from Nuuanu Reservoir number 4, where the catfish fishing is, you'll see a tower in the center of that reservoir number 4. That's what we call the outlet tower. There's also a spillway. So with the outlet tower, we can actually more easily release water from that reservoir to control the levels. Unfortunately, Nuuanu Reservoir number 1 doesn't have such a structure or capability. It does have a spillway, but it doesn't have an outlet structure that we can allow for controlled releases downstream.
Just a quick note, folks. We have a reporter microphone for our folks watching live on Facebook. So if you could wait till the microphone gets to you, so everybody can hear some questions.
So for reservoir number 1, I'll say we are doing the studies and the engineering necessary to make improvements there, but those improvements won't occur overnight.
But is there usually a protocol for any dams, including this one, as far as what you would do? You would lower them when a storm is coming? Is that usually done?
That's usually done where we try to, ahead of time before the storm, start to lower the levels behind it and allow for more capacity behind the dam.
So this is done with that particular...
We started before Olivia came with the siphons in place to actually start to lower the levels. But unfortunately, we didn't lower it enough to actually achieve enough capacity to handle the rains we saw last night. I think it was about 4 or 5 feet lower than what it is right now. Yeah.
So Ernie, you said 1 foot from the
top of the dam. Yes.
Where's the spillway in relation to that, and where's the water now?
Wayne, that's a very good question. So picture the top of the dam as being here at this level. The spillway is actually lower by about 3.5 feet. So about the elevation above sea level about 396. The top of the dam at 399.5. So about 3.5 feet lower than the top of the dam. Our concern is if the rains were very heavy, that the spillway, the amount of water that the spillway could release would not be adequate, and water levels behind the dam would continue to rise, and we want to avoid the dam, water going over the dam itself.
So Ernie, where's the water now?
Water right now, Wayne, is about 394. It's between 394 and 395. Yeah.
So that's how far from the 3.5?
It's still, let's see, remember the top of the dam is elevation-wise 399.5. So we still have a bunch of feet below the top of the dam, and that's why I want to stress the dam is not at risk of failure at this time. But out of the abundance of caution, we decided to start pumping. And the other things we're doing are refining our evacuation plans, working with the city Department of Emergency Management.
Ernie, you know, the rain gauges were saying there were 8 inches of rain up until 10 o'clock this morning. How many inches of rain would it take to fill up the reservoir to that danger level?
I'm not a hydrologist, so I don't have an answer to that question, but the watershed that feeds this reservoir is a smaller watershed, so it's not the entire Nuuanu Valley. But I don't have the answer to that question.
In 2003, we reported that the Board of Water Supply was working on renovations to the reservoir. What's the status of that? And did that have any effect on today's incident?
Today's situation, you know, is we're dealing with these tropical cyclones, and this hurricane season happens to be almost like a repeat of 2015. We actually have, for Nuuanu Reservoir number 4, about a $7 million project or construction project right now to do upgrades to that reservoir. We are in design for reservoir number 1. Last session, the state legislature was kind enough to authorize some special purpose revenue bonds for us to improve, to use as an option to finance the improvement of these dams for Nuuanu Reservoir number 1 and number 4. Unfortunately, for number one, we are not at the point of going into construction yet. We're still in the design stages, but we kind of know what we need to do here.
For residents that are concerned, is there somewhere that they can go to see a map of where this dam is located and where they're in proximity to their home? Where, is it available on your website or social media?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at putting some things up, including the evacuation maps out there, and it actually might be already up.
Yeah, we have maps to pass out to everyone. They kind of look like this.
Yeah. So, actually, you want to look at it this way. This is the right side. So the reservoir is this little spot right up here. And the red lines indicate the areas that we would look at evacuating should the reservoir fail. Again, I want to stress the reservoir is not in danger of failing, but the plans are identified already, and we're refining those plans if we had to exercise that option. This is the area, kind of the area that we would look at evacuating people from.
Ernie,
Yes.
how would 10,000 residents be notified if there was an emergency evacuation?
I think those are some of the challenges, and I maybe ask Hero to assist here from Department of Emergency Management on how to get that messaging out quickly.
So on a related question, what happened this morning in terms of the notification process? There seemed to be a lot of confusion. Was there a need to put something out, and then only to pull it back, maybe an hour later?
Actually, there was, Gordon, there was no need to actually put a notification out to the community because there was no need to evacuate because Nuuanu Reservoir number 1 was not in danger of failing. Remember, the water level in the reservoir behind the reservoir had not even reached the spillway, was approaching the spillway. So our protocol is to notify the EOC here, and I decided to actually start pumping to reduce the level even faster than relying upon our siphons.
But somebody put something out. I think it was the mayor's.
We did put out a press release, and just to keep people informed because we were starting to get inquiries from media also, and also from community members because they suddenly saw all this activity and water coming down the stream that normally doesn't have a lot of water flowing down the stream.
Say it did spill over. How quickly would residents need to evacuate that area outlined on the map?
I think there are some models that estimate the time it takes for the water to travel in different locations. So I believe down at the lowest part near the coast, the flow time might be over an hour. But if you're close to the reservoir, of course, if the reservoir is failing and you're right next to the reservoir, then you're going to feel the effects more immediately. So it really varies depending on where you're located downstream of the reservoir, of the dam.
Just add something to that.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Hiro Toya. I'm the Deputy Director for the Department of Emergency Management, City and County of Honolulu. So regarding the evacuation question and how much time people have, we would actually start the evacuation before the failure occurs. Right. And our goal is to complete the evacuation notification within 1 hour's time. And so we believe that using resources from the city, fire, police, and also our Department of Emergency Management Volunteer Corps, we can successfully conduct that notification before the failure occurs in time for folks to evacuate. Now, again, out of an abundance of caution, we refined our plans this morning. We have an incident management team activated to look at specifically what type of resources we're going to need and how they would strategically approach the evacuation notification. So we will be having the responders go around the neighborhood, conducting notifications, and we would also work through the media to conduct the notification, as well as any means that we have to get that notification out.
So how do you monitor water levels at the dam? Is it an automated system, or do you need a person there to...
There is a gauge at the reservoir, and we also have cameras on site, and we can visually observe. And Ernie, if you want to talk about...
Okay. So there are two ways that we kind of monitor. Oh, actually, three ways. We send staff also out there to do a spot check. The state was kind enough to install some automated equipment so you can remotely monitor water levels behind the dam. We also have a camera that's positioned to look over the dam, and you can relatively, you don't have a marker to indicate the feet, but you can actually see the relationship of the water, top of the water surface behind the dam and the top of the dam itself. So those are kind of the three ways we're monitoring the situation there.
Ernie, so you also have a reservoir in Kaneohe?
No, actually, okay, so for Board of Water Supply that we're responsible for, we have a regulated dam these are regulated dams that are, I think, higher than 25 feet in height. Nuuanu Reservoir number 4, the big one with the concrete circular tower and the bridge to that tower. Nuuanu Reservoir number 1, which is the small one we're talking about today on the Ewa side of Pali Highway. We also have a small reservoir in Makaha, the Manaolu Reservoir there that's also regulated. And Denise, did I miss so? I think those are the three reservoirs that are regulated that are responsibility of the Board of Water Supply. The other reservoirs are the responsibility of the respective owners of those reservoirs.
So what is the status then of the other reservoirs as far as how high they are and how are you monitoring them?
So for Manaolu, we have a camera trained on that reservoir. And we've been also doing the same thing we're doing at reservoir number 1, releasing water. On that one, we can actually control the release of water.
How high is that one?
I don't have the height of that or the depth of the water behind that reservoir in mind right now. I can get back to you on that.
And Manaolu?
That's Manaolu.
Okay.
Yeah, Nuuanu, I believe, it's been a few days since I looked at it. It was standing around 29 or 30 feet of depth behind the reservoir. Actually very low. If you've hiked out there recently, you've probably seen that the water levels are pretty low in that reservoir. So the depth...
The reservoir, what is its main purpose today?
Okay, today. Today, right now, okay, so this is the reservoirs, I think, take on a more of a limited flood control purpose or benefit to our community because they help to keep high rainfall events or stormwater from flowing downstream. So you feel the effects of a heavy storm immediately. So they kind of mute the effects by storing it behind the reservoir. And that means the reservoir has to store a lot of water. The other thing that we're looking at for Nuuanu Reservoir number 4 and number 1 is actually two things. We're doing a study of generating hydropower, pumped hydro, so making electricity because reservoir number 4 is up here in terms of elevation above sea level. Reservoir number 1 is quite a few hundreds of feet lower than reservoir number 4. So water flowing downhill can also generate electricity. We're also looking at, because of the issues of climate change, the opportunity to actually use the reservoirs to capture rainfall during heavy rainfall events. And remember, in climate change, the amount of rainfall over the islands might decrease, but there might be more intense short-duration storms that happen to us. So capturing that water before it flows into the ocean, we are looking at, we're studying the possibility of using reservoir number 4 and number 1 as an aquifer recharge project to help capture that rainfall and treat it and recharge it a groundwater aquifer. So another question, Wayne?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ernie, you said it was a 1 acre foot of water. How much water is that
Actually,
at Reservoir 1?
100 acre feet is their estimated storage.
Acres, 1 foot deep.
Yeah, or an acre 1 foot deep, I think, is an acre foot. So that would be 100 acres over 1 foot of water.
So that's a substantial amount of water.
It is a substantial amount of water, but it's much smaller than reservoir number 4. Yeah, Wayne, I should have done the calculation in millions of gallons, something that most people understand.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
21 million.
21 million gallons. Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. I'm an engineer too, and I still.
So
But
Ernie, you've been talking about potential for spillover and that this is an earthen dam. Was there any possibility, or is there a possibility that this could collapse, or?
we're a regulated dam, so periodically we're subject to inspection. I think there might have been an inspection in 2017 or. Yeah, so periodically the regulators, which is the Department of Land and Natural Resources, will do a inspection of the dam, and they'll inform us of deficiencies that we have to correct.
But is there a potential for the dam to collapse?
Gordon, I don't believe so. Yeah.
I have a follow-up. So based on 21 million gallons, that brings us back to the subject that you really love. That's 27 million gallons, like a tank full at Red Hill.
This wasn't meant to be a discussion about underground fuel storage tanks, but when you think about it, one tank at Red Hill is 12.5 million gallons of fuel. So 2 tanks would be about 25 million gallons. So
2 Aloha Towers
yeah,
worth of water.
Yeah, Wayne, that's a good analogy.
Ernie, is it rare for something like this to happen? Has this happened before with one of the dams in the past, where it's gotten near capacity level or to that point where, you had to go and siphon out water?
I've been with the board now almost 7 years as manager, and this is actually the siphoning out of water or trying to reduce the level. It's kind of a normal practice, but in this case for reservoir number 1, and I apologize for creating great concern in the community about why we're taking this aggressive action, but I wanted to take a more aggressive, proactive approach by actually pumping water out of this reservoir. This reservoir, like I said, is built in 1905. It doesn't have the outlet structure. It has a spillway, so the only other way we can get it out is by siphoning it or by actually pumping it out and putting it back in the stream downstream. So I just took I took a very conservative, cautionary approach, trying to anticipate that Tropical Storm Olivia may not be the last storm we see this season. That we're going to continue to pump to lower the level as much as we can before the next storm.
As far as emergency evacuation plans, what is actually required from the Board of Water Supply, as well as how much of the residents have been informed that this is a possibility that they could be evacuated, and it would need to do so within an hour?
I don't believe, and I can't say what was done in the past, if there was actually an outreach to inform the community about this situation. I think there's an opportunity for greater communication with our community downstream from these dams about the unlikely failure of a dam and what the evacuation requirements would be at this time. It's an opportunity for us to improve outreach. And actually, in a way, you kind of... So Tropical Storm Olivia put a lot of stress on everybody, and I guess this is actually an opportunity to communicate more to our community about these dams that they live in their communities, that exist in their communities, and to actually prepare them, much like what we tell everybody about preparing for a hurricane, 14 days of food and water. I think likewise, I'm going to view this as an opportunity for the people that are in this potential evacuation zone as add another preparation plan to your kit of having to do an evacuation on a short notice if the dam, in the unlikely case, the dam might fail. But Manolo, it's a good question. For communities living below dams like this, I think this is actually an opportunity to become even more prepared.
Yeah. Before Hurricane Lane, the mayor had asked residents to conserve water so that you could fill up some tanks and maybe reservoirs? Is there any connection between that and this event?
Absolutely not. The water behind Nuuanu Reservoir number 4 is not meant for drinking and does not get into our pipes to our customers. The tanks that we talk about filling up in preparation for like a hurricane for people to store water are potable tanks. They are usually concrete tanks with a roof on it, and the water in them is safe. So before a hurricane comes, we are island-wide to do the precautionary approach of filling 171 of these tanks island-wide to store water. Should we lose electricity to pump water, we at least have water in these tanks for a day or two.